Hi, my name's Tim Macpherson, as many of you will know, from saltwater boat angling and also from the Angling Trust. And this is another video about tuna, bluefin tuna, something everyone's very excited about. And with me today again is Steve Murphy from Bluefin Tuna UK. And we're just going to talk about some of the aspects around some of the developments that have happened over the last couple of months, very recent developments, and try and clarify some of the issues around whether we are or aren't allowed to go fishing and who is and who isn't. So just welcome Steve, just to start this off. Now, as we previously discussed and I mentioned earlier, the UK has received a small quota amount from, as a result of our divorce deal with the European Union. It's about 0.25% of their total, I think, isn't it?
Yeah.
How does that quota change the situation regarding any form of fishing, recreational, commercial fishing, in the UK waters?
Sure. Well, receipt of the quota itself doesn't really change an awful lot, to be honest. I think we try to point out from when we started the campaign that you need quota to be able to sort of authorise and operate a recreational fishery, the sort we've been campaigning for. But the key is, and authorise, and so whatever quota the UK government has received, they have to make a decision as to what they're going to do with that quota, and specifically, authorise that process. So it doesn't change anything suddenly overnight. It's not as if commercials can suddenly start fishing for bluefin. It's not as if recreational was to change anything for us there particularly. Certainly the prohibition on targeting bluefin that DEFRA and the MMO have argued for the last 4 or 5 years, that is not changed just by the receipt of quota. They have to authorise the fishery and all the controls that go with it, but legally. So that doesn't change much. By the way, we are still waiting confirmation of that quota transfer. The EU needs to sign that off, and that process is still ongoing. It shouldn't be an issue. And if we don't get the quota, if the EU play hardball for whatever reason, there are other fallback plans with regards to some of the other things we're going to talk about. But anyway, it doesn't change an awful lot. But what they had to do was by the 15th of February, DEFRA had to notify the species management body ICAT of what their intentions were for this coming year. Like every ICAT member has to. They put in a fishing plan, it's called. And that basically was really important because it meant we'd have to keep our options open. So anything we might want to consider doing this year had to be in the fishing plan. And that was really quite key. So we lobbied hard to include both the option of the research fishery chart, which we've been working on since last year with them. But also now we had quota, the possibility existed that we could move towards that sort of recreational live release fishery, something wider ranging, and maybe operate, chart and that in parallel, like the Norwegians operate a parallel program like that for recreationals. So we lobbied for, for both those. DEFRA agreed regarding the research fishery, and that was included in the fishing plan. So that option is on the table still for us, but they declined to put into the fishing plan the optionality of a proper live release recreational fishery, which was disappointing. It was a sudden new option that came about when we got quota, which we weren't really expecting, and we've always viewed this as being sort of a step-by-step process, and next year we always thought was the earliest we could get a recreational fishery, but it's still disappointing. But they did give, we spoke to them in some depth about this, and there are some valid reasons for that. One in particular is that there are some legislative changes that need to be made, which will be difficult to push through before the summer recess. And so it legally was going to be quite difficult to structure that fishery at such short notice. What it does is it makes the path to a recreational fishery, having a quota makes a path to a recreational fishery a bit easier. It makes the path to chart a bit easier in terms of what national quota we can tap into and stuff. But it's a good thing, and no doubt it's a good thing, but we shouldn't be under the illusion it doesn't change a huge amount on day one. It's really about government policy now that's and then what they authorise the key issues.
Because I've heard there's people ringing me up, emailing me about this, and I've heard all sorts of stories about people buying boats and getting gear ready, and they're going to rush down to Cornwall to go tuna fishing and spending a lot of money, some of them, and presumably they are doing that this year at any rate it's a bit of a waste of time, really. Is that right? I mean, they're not really allowed to do any kind of fishing for tuna.
Well, I'll say nothing has changed in that respect. I mean, the difference is that we will have a number, we hope, number of specifically authorised charter vessels operating a chart programme, which we'll come on to, I know. But the situation as regards private vessels has not changed this year. We're hopeful for the future, but it hasn't changed for this year. We have always tried to be clear that, quota in itself was never just the solution. We have to have authorisation from the government. We have to have a policy decision to allow them to operate on the correct fishery. Yeah, so.
Okay. You talked about charts just now, and we've mentioned this many times in other conversations and on blogs and in articles. Can you just explain what that means exactly?
Yeah, sure. We do get used to throwing our acronyms around, not using people. Okay, so chart is an acronym that came out of Ireland. We basically stole it from the Irish programme, and now it's used widely across the UK and Scandinavia. It's an acronym for Catch and Release Tagging Programme. And what it is basically, they are research programs that are large scale in comparison to the sort of very narrow satellite tagging programs. They are largely FLOI tag, sort of dumb tag based. They're low cost, large scale, and they're supported and endorsed by ICAP. They're operated in Ireland, Denmark, and Sweden I think Denmark and Sweden they're now in their sort of fourth or fifth year of running these. And they operate alongside multiple other research programs that ICAP operate as well as part of their bigger research program. But they're basically, ICAP have been particularly supportive of these. They're sort of angler-led. They've been particularly supportive of these in the last few years because of this big change in spatial distribution that's occurred. Yeah. So they're really keen to get information about what's happening in the far northeast Atlantic, where these fish have returned in the last 5 or 6 years. That's the key. But I would stress, look, they're very tightly regulated and monitored programs. They are research programs. They use specifically authorized and trained skippers, very controlled environment. So it's not a free-for-all by any means. I mean, I think we can't forget they are research programs first and foremost, and that's the option that's been on the table for us last year and this year is that style of program, and that's what we're working towards right now.
Okay. So where are we actually at with this then, with the chart program? What's the current situation with organising it?
Yeah, sure. So I guess the first thing I'll stress is the discussions that we've been having with DEFRA on this for some time relate to an English chart program because of how fishing competency and sort of devolved authorities work. It's really been about England, and it's really up to Scotland and Wales and so on to look at their own chart programs. I've been working with Scottish stakeholders for several years actually, and they've really made great progress on this. So they effectively had a program sort of signed off, they got funding for it. It may well all just go ahead this year. I think DEFRA feel they have to sign off on it, but even so. So that's made great progress. We're talking to the Welsh Federation of Sea Anglers, a number of charter skippers there, particularly one guy who's very experienced in this area working on the Thomas tagging program before. We're talking to Northern Ireland as well, but the Irish Fisheries Authorities, Northern Ireland Fisheries Authorities, are not being particularly enthusiastic about it. So it's an English program, but we're hopeful that it would be adopted in other devolved authorities as well. So where are we? Okay, so we're currently here at the early March. We're in the third month of a 3-month consultation process that will finalise what a English chart program could look like if they go ahead. When we spoke last year, I think it was in October. We were in phase 1, which was very much a sort of the feasibility study we were doing with DEFRA. All the issues around, would it be of scientific value? How do you manage fish welfare and mortality? You have a legal frameworks. It was a very technical discussion. It was very labour intensive. I mean, I'll bore you with this, but we had over 30 Zoom calls. We had hundreds of email exchanges. We reviewed dozens of scientific papers. We actually submitted 10 papers, about 30,000 words on a range of topics. We brought in experts from the US, with the guys who ran the Irish and Scandi programs. I mean, we basically had to answer an awful lot of questions and concerns, which we did effectively, and that allowed us to move to phase 2, which really is about the the nuts and bolts of what a program might look like. So when I say we, I mean we're talking about sort of stakeholder representatives. That we've been working with a group of skippers that's been growing over the last 2 to 3 years. The PBA, Professional Boaters Association, has taken on a big role, representing generously not only their own members but also a range of other charter skippers. We've got a number of clubs, the Shark Angling Club of Britain, the SCBI, that bring particular expertise. Angling Trust obviously has been supportive of it, and I engage with a large number of individual anglers, businesses and so on, here and overseas. So there's a lot of input into it. Consultations are always difficult to balance. You make them too wide, you never get anything done. You make them too narrow, you get accusations that you're not consulting. So I think we've set up 2, and we're probably going to have 3 or 4 Zoom calls with skippers. I mean, we might get 30, 40, 50 skippers, we'll see. To try and balance, what they need and what they want from a chart program with what, the scientists at CFAS are demanding, what the regulatory framework requires and that sort of stuff. So, we are engaging with them. So that process will finish around the end of March, early April. If it then goes to the minister to review, and if Victoria Prentice, gives us the green light, then that process moves to, okay, we're now moving into the operational phase, and how do we set it up? And all those discussions about, skipper selection process, how does that start, or when does that start? All the real nuts and bolts. So there'll be a lot of work to do. The training and workshop aspect of it, all that sort of thing.
Time, because the season will start in August, won't it? So late
If
August.
it goes to plan, the intention would be, mid-August, for around 3 months. We're still thrashing out the details of exactly what that looks like and the operational aspects of it. But yeah, we hope to have an answer on this within the next month.
It's clear there's an awful lot of stuff going on behind the scenes that people don't quite know about, and certainly, as I've said earlier, there's a lot of misinformation or confusion or overexcitement. By doing this, we're seeking to try and calm everything down a little bit, because it is a very staged process, and having followed it through, the amount of work that's gone into it behind the scenes is quite incredible.
It's a very difficult balance to strike. I speak to 2 or 3 people every day who contact me on this subject, so we're trying to be open. I've presented to 2 groups of 100 anglers via the Angling Trust Forum,
yes,
and via one of the big Southwest private boat owners clubs. But it is difficult. I appreciate people's frustrations. One thing, for example, in the last few days, we've been contacted by private boat owners saying, really angry that, the word's getting out that if it happens, it's going to be a charter boat-led thing, and why private boats not involved in it. It happened in Scandinavia. And I get their frustration, but we say, look, there are 2 reasons for that. Is one, when DEFRA and CFAS looked at the Irish and the Scandinavian programs, they concluded for whatever reason that a sort of Scandi-style private boat-led program, chart program, was not something they would support at this stage. It would be too many boats, and they would lose control of that. And also, there's an issue that because there's not a central register or requirement to license private boats, I think DEFRA and CFAS's view, I don't claim to speak for them, but was that you wouldn't effectively be able to control who was in the program. And that is a requirement of that ICAT would place on these sort of things. So the Scandinavians, they found a way around it, but DEFRA didn't feel they could. So for the moment, what we're looking at is an Irish-style charter boat-led program rather than private boats. But that's not to say that I have any prejudice, far from it, to the private boat sector. In the long term, we do see them as absolutely as participants in any sort of fishery down the road.
Yeah, but also, am I right in thinking that the charter boats will get involved? Of course, they'll be the point of contact, or the licensed end of it. But actually, they'll be paying anglers out, won't they, on their boats to do this. So recreational anglers will have an opportunity to have a bash at. You just have to do it within the confines of the program. Is that right?
Absolutely. And this is the Irish have been hugely successful at attracting anglers to fish in this program. So you get to do it. The skippers will be specifically authorised. But it's just a charter otherwise, and they're going to be controls over the gear, the techniques. There'll be sort of fight time constraints and so on. It's you will effectively have to sign up to a code of conduct, but that's reasonable because, in my view, because this is a science program and you're getting an opportunity to access, this fishing in a safe, controlled, professional environment, and know that you're contributing to important science that will help us, we believe, with our arguments in the in the longer term as well.
That's really, really important. So, one of the things quite a few people have commented on or asked me about, or even assumed, is that commercial fishing will have a slice of this cake. I mean, what is the, what's the situation with commercial fishing and this bluefin tuna quota?
Well, I mean, the commercials are going to lobby for for whatever their interests are, and that's absolutely understandable. We're lobbying for recreational sea anglers and charter skippers. They'll do what they do, and we do what we do. And I would say that in the first point I'd make is that the quota is pretty meaningless to these guys. I mean, the first landings value of 50 tons, if that's what it is somewhere in the order of about £1 million. And when you consider the support program for the shellfish sector alone, they just support was 23 million. It gives you a sense of the scale of what bluefin really means with this limited quota. It's pretty meaningless. I mean, for a proper commercial fishery to operate, the UK government needs to be securing significantly more quota than 50 tons. So they did not put any application in the fishing plan. I mentioned earlier that they didn't put any application in DEFRA for any form of targeted commercial fishery. They also declined to put forward a pilot commercial fishing program that was proposed by a number of people that we're aware of. For whatever reason, I think there are clearly regulatory issues. I mean, we started this process with DEFRA, basically 2 years ago, right? And so I think we're ahead of the pack in terms of a lot of those obstacles, a lot of those challenges. What they did put in, as far as commercials is concerned, is that, and this is a legal requirement, now we're a ICAP member with quota, is you have to have a plan to monitor and account for bycatch. Right. That's commercial fishery bycatch, or in the shark fishery, for example, if there are bluefin caught in the recreational shark fishery that die, there needs to be a bycatch quota that's set aside against those fish. So that's the case. But I mean, the commercials will lobby. I have no philosophical issue with a commercial fishery if the data supports it. But we've always said, look, this is one example where we need to be the guys at the front of the queue because our proposal is economically, socially, scientifically, on every metric, we make much better use of a very limited resource. So good luck to them, but that's not really our problem or concern. I was pleased, when we saw, George Eustace, Secretary of State at DEFRA, he came out on the BBC Spotlight piece, and was very supportive of the proposal, and so I also kind of make the point that this is about sort of a recreational led and focused effort this year. Yeah. He specifically stressed that over commercial. So I think down the road, there's a different issue, but this year, it looks as if anybody's going to be, in the driving seat as regards this operations around bluefin, it's going to be, recreationals. And that support has been, it's been very widespread. I mentioned George Eustace, but, we've got a lot of political support, not just sort of West Country Conservative MPs, but Luke Pollard, Labour Shadow Secretary of the Environment, has come out and publicly supported us. We speak to MPs in Plaid Cymru in Wales, for example, SNP guys in Scotland. It's very widely based, the support that we see.
So what happens next? Where's the next stage going with this?
Well, next, okay, so we would complete the phase 2 consultation, as I say, by the end of March. All goes to plan. We will move forward with the operational aspects of it, the training. The MMO have to issue, they're creating a whole new scientific license for charter skippers to operate this fishery. So there's lots of work like that needs to be done. So, and then Shark will be sort of on that, on that track. In parallel to that, it's important to note that in the spring, the government will be launching a wider consultation around the long-term future, around strategy and management for Atlantic bluefin. Yeah, and that will bring in not just recreational sea anglers will be there. Other groups can get involved as well. We have no monopoly on this. We've never claimed to have a monopoly on representing recreational sea anglers in this. commercial fishermen will be represented, no doubt, you know, the conservation bodies and so on. And my guess is that probably it will be early 2022 before they come to any sort of real conclusions about long-term strategy and how they're going to use quota and so on. If we get chart up and running, you know, fingers crossed, it will be an important contribution to that discussion, because it will tell us, you know, how you might be able to operate a fishery, the impact it has. The science we extract from chart, you know, will inform a lot of decisions about, you know, how many are there, where are they, you know, age groups, all these sort of things. So it's a very important scientific program in its own right, you know, as well as being sort of
in terms of licensing and also operational stuff in terms of licensing and how you control the fishing effort too. I mean, the chart program will help with that, won't it? I imagine. Yeah,
exactly. I mean, it's like, if you like, it's a potential test bed and a stepping stone. I mean, look, our ultimate aim has always been a recreational live release fishery. But we've also made very clear from day one that we've always felt that, you know, having a sort of parallel research program, one of the huge benefits of having a live release fishery is, you know, you can operate these scientific programs alongside them, and you can gather data that no other, you know, format, you know, commercial fishing of any sort or whatever, any other research program can gather. So, and it has, you know, obviously the socio-economic benefits that it brings as well. On that note, you know, DEFRA are now beginning to acknowledge, you know, that there are potential socio-economic benefits from chart, but in particular, you know, subsequently a larger scale recreational fishery. And we're talking about, if it goes ahead, some kind of survey like the Irish did. I replied to their survey when I fished there in the last couple of years, which will sort of give you a sense of, okay, what's the real economic potential, who benefits from it, how much they benefit, where's the money coming from, you know, how much it was overseas, etc. Interestingly, I mentioned Scotland earlier on. You know, Scotland are actually quite a way ahead of us on this in England. They've already funded a socio-economic survey to look in advance, in theory, and also in practice, if they get their chart program running this year, to look at exactly these issues and the money, you know, what it would mean for the Western Isles in particular. So they're pushing heavily, you know, local councils and chambers of commerce, and we're getting people in the business sector that are sitting up and saying, you know, we recognise there is some real value from this. It's, you know, it all needs to be done properly. You know, everyone's got this caveat, the conservation aspect of it, you know, rightly. But you know, there is clearly value here. I mean, Torbay Chamber of Commerce, for example, did a fantastic job. They, you know, been talking to them for a year or so. They put a piece out last year, or early this year, and that had unprecedented response, you know, from businesses in the Torbay area and lobbying their local MP. And Anthony Manganall down there has become a real, you know, supporter and flag waver for, you know, the kind of benefits that not just bluefin can bring, but also, you know, the wider recreational sea angling sector, which, you know, we looked at this for years now. We get overlooked. We're worth, you know, multiples of the commercial sector. But, you know, we're finally getting people sitting up and saying, you know, this RSA operation is really quite a meaningful, you know, topic, an issue economically. So
it's about getting organised, really, and showing. It always has been about showing DEFRA and government and politicians that, you know, there are numbers out there and they're spending money and in the right places, and that the sector is just not some guy on the end of the pier. It's actually quite substantial. So I think you know, that argument is almost, I wouldn't say it's been won, but
the guy on the end of the pier spends money, right? You know, he's contributing.
Yeah, it's good stuff.
Yeah, I think it's being recognised. I mean, Bluefin is an interesting precedent in that respect. You know, it's not just, this thing's not just about what Bluefin can do in terms of chance to fish for big fish and do some science on bluefin. And you set a precedent here about the, you know, the prioritisation of a species where its recreational value is significantly greater than its commercial value per tonne. You know, that's a really interesting set of arguments to have in our back pocket when we're looking at species like bass and mullet, where you can make the same arguments. You know, bluefin is, if you like, it can be a flag bearer for a much wider debate around recreational sea angling and where we sit in the hierarchy of fish management.
Yeah, no, it's excellent. Well, that's great. I mean, that's really clear, the way you've described it. I think it's really important to emphasise that this is not a situation where we have a free-for-all. You know, it is still tightly controlled and managed.
You know, and hopefully, I mean, you know, the beauty of things like chart and recreational fisheries is you provide that framework, you know, that professionalism wraps around it from chart skippers and, you know, well-informed private anglers and stuff that changes that. So, conservation bodies are an interesting one. I mean, I don't want to speak too much about them because we are discussing this with a number of them. The debate, discussion with those people is really it's quite encouraging that it's very sort of rational. It's scientifically based. We have a very sensible argument. We're not on the same page on everything, but there is a recognition of what our intentions are and the science that's behind it. So we don't, when we talk to the serious conservation groups, you know, it's a much more grown-up discussion.
We want to conserve the fish as much as they do. I think that a lot of the conservation bodies, they may, as I said, we don't necessarily agree with them on everything, but fundamentally they understand that we are as interested in conserving these fish as they are.
Yeah, the end game, what we all want, you know, is healthy, sustainable stocks of these fish, you know, in our waters. We all agree on that. You know, where we differ is, you know, the processes of, you know, management and strategy, you know, and where recreational sea angling fits within that. And so I have been encouraged in the last couple of weeks by some of those discussions. I'm not expecting these guys to run out and start waving the flag for us, you know, anytime soon. But I think there is clearly an understanding that, you know, this is a serious sort of professional approach with sustainability, you know, welfare, fish welfare, mortality, etc. You know, and the long-term future of bluefin, you know, really at its heart.
Fantastic. All right. Well, thanks very much, Steve. That's very useful and very informative. I've no doubt that we'll come back to this again. We'll keep posting bulletins over the next few months when things change, and you know, keep up the good work. Thank you very much.
Well, thanks, Neil. Thanks for your time again. It's good to chat.
All right. Cheers. Thanks.
Take care. Thanks.